apologies from Councillors Andrew Stevens and Paul Tucker.
And Paul. Item 2 then, any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? Not seen any. Any? No. Item 3 is to approve and sign them as a correct record the minutes of the previous meeting, which you see on page 1 to 5. That was back in October. Page 1, 2, page 3, 4, and page 5. Somebody move as a true record, please.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Right, and then on to the agenda proper then, if you like. Item 4 then is from Chris's mass participation events. And you can see Chris's report there. Did you want to add anything to it, Chris? Or?
If I could just so I think Councillor Mark Childs raised his hand and wanted to say something.
Mark, did you want to speak first?
Yes, sorry, there's no matters arising on the agenda, but I just wondered, about the Tourism Pressures Committee, subcommittee. I wonder if it had got a timetable of meetings and
Sorry, we're losing you.
Yeah.
We're losing you, Mark.
Static.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark, we lost
hello.
you.
Oh, shall I ask again?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. The Working Party on Tourist Impact, I believe, I forget the exact title. I wondered if it had met, if it got a schedule of meetings, and if it had a time to report back. I welcome its establishment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Could I respond to that, please, Paul?
Yeah, please, Chris. Yeah.
So we did have a preliminary meeting on the 22nd of November. I think the issue was because this was following on from the discussion we had at the last AONB partnership. It was quite clear that there could have been a whole raft of issues that we could have been looking at and needed to discuss. So we did have that preliminary meeting, and I think the outcome of that meeting was that we said we would prepare an issues log to put all of the issues and impacts down, and then identify which ones were most appropriate for the partnership to look at and tackle, and which ones we needed to discuss with other stakeholders, or perhaps try and influence other levels of government. That issue, I'm grateful to Hamish Osborne for starting that issues log off. I've added some more issues to it. My intention is that I will finish doing what I can on it before the end of this week and issue it out to those members who attended that preliminary working group, and if we could have that populated by any other issues that people think we need to look at. I was going to say if we could have that completed by Christmas, then we should have another meeting early in the new year to go through that and prioritise the ones that we think are most important.
Yeah. Okay, Mark. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chris.
All right, thank you. Yes, it was a productive meeting, fair play. Any other hands up? Quite comprehensive report from you, Chris, isn't it? And get some ways forward on this now. And perhaps we can seek advice from other authorities, how they handle the mass participation events, because they go on all around the country all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Sorry, that was sort of almost an addition, that particular paper around mass participation events. So I'm sure everybody's aware of the issue around the Ironman event happening in summer, and its conflict with date conflict with the Gower show,
Yeah.
which has now had to move its date back a week, I think it is, because of the proposed road closures for the Ironman. So you know, I wrote that paper, obviously, you know, in the knowledge of that, but also on the basis that there are potentially other impacts from these kind of events. So I just tried to give a flavour there of what those might be. And it's I guess it's a case of, you know, if the partnership wants to discuss that now, that would be great. But I suspect, you know, that's one of the specific issues for the issues log that we need to be bringing to the fore.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Correct. Right. No other hands up there to speak. No. Mark, back in. Mark.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris, for this. It's an important aspect, and I think I had a quick look at the one that you supplied. It was the Brecon Beacons policy. It seems the one thing we need to consider is not just events on their own; it's the cumulative number of events, and then it's and they're each individual effect, because clearly the Macmillan Walk, for example, is mentioned in the report, and that's a well-established one. But if you were walking from Mumbles to Rossilly on that day, it might be a bit awkward with the amount of people walking the other way, certainly on certain sections of the path. So it's not something that could be done every weekend, or that, you know, we need to watch the frequency of stuff like that. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that it was talking about the making good afterwards. I forget the term it actually uses, which is good, picking up litter, closing down, you know, way stations and that sort of thing. I think perhaps a little consideration of what might be the impact prior to the event as well, so organisers know what's expected after the event, because often it's difficult to enforce things after the fact when they haven't been discussed prior to it. But I think it's a really useful document, and something we need to adopt in Gower. Thank you.
Could I come out in, Chairman?
I got a few other speakers first, if you don't mind, Gordon. That's right, I'll call you in a moment. Paul Thornton.
Yeah, hi. This has been a little bugbear of mine in Wildlife Trust capacity for quite a while. I queried it with Rights Away team about whether these organisers needed landowner permission or such like, because we have no prior notification of these going on, which leads to conflict, not with our activities necessarily, but like where we've got grazing animals on the coast, things like that. The first time I spoke to Endurance Life actually was because one of the ponies grazing one of their sites was eating one of their supplementary waymarker flags, full of wire. Yeah, so we have no notification. The last event that Endurance Life did, I only found out about because of signage in my home village, Klein, and we were due to deliver ponies over to Mere the day of that event. It's as though, you know, our normal life has to stop. We can't get on with our jobs easily. And a bit of notification from the organisers of all sorts of events be useful. Yeah,
indeed. It's a very kind of thing that we need to coordinate, is it not? Thank you, Paul. John France?
Yes, and when does an event become a mass participation event? I was going to say mass annihilation event, but perhaps not. Because quite a lot of people in a small area can make a very big impact. And I mean, I've come across, for example, groups, very large groups of cyclists, which are notified to anybody. And they can block, and indeed a very large number of walkers could block. And it is very difficult to see how you can regulate totally, in the sense that this thing from Brecon seems to suggest. Has anybody given any thought to what is a mass participation event? Or is the definition a mass participation event that is notified? Because that's a circular argument if you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair comment, John. Gordon, sorry, Gordon.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, members, because if we're not careful, we get accused of denying other people. Why should they not be able to join the events? But for instance, on some of these events, these are privately organised events for the benefit of the participants, and but in particular for the benefit of the people who are organising it. Let's not kick it around. It's a financial venture on their part, and there were 1,400 people took part in the event at Uxwich, which is about a month ago. Now, 1,400 people is a hell of a lot of people starting off at one point, going around a circular route and coming back. By definition, they're going to get strung out. But it certainly will ruin lots of other people's pleasure if they're walking along the same route. And it's this difficult balancing act. And then you get the problem of week after week after week, question mark. There's far more going on than what we realise. And I think within the subgroup, I think we should be looking at getting some central point where a register is kept and somebody at least ticks a box and says, well, there's no other event on the same day coming the opposite way. I'll leave it at that, because the subgroup should be able to discuss this further.
Oh, but that is, I think, to me, the point, isn't it, Gordon, is that if it's a central point of notification,
yes,
and then you could then say to any department or
yes,
community council or organisations, when they say, what do you think? Have you got something happening that day, to make sure that, as you say, it doesn't coincide and cause problems? Yeah,
Paul, these are very well organised events.
yeah,
they've got to be, because the amount of people that are taking part, they've got to follow a lot of procedures. But do they all follow the procedures, and are they logged? As I say, I'm repeating myself. There must be somewhere where there's a log for Gower that says there's this event going on, and the council is the obvious authority to keep that log.
Yeah. Correct. Thank you. Paxton.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask the question as to what requirement is there on any organisers to inform anybody, and if so, whom at the end of the day? And how we organise that, because we can't write as a council, let's say, to thousands of organisations and say, if you want a mass participation event in Gower, you've got to let us know first. I'm not quite sure the practicalities of it and how we could see it working.
No.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Mike? You're on mute, Mike.
Sorry. Thank you. There is a National Association of Fundraisers, and they have a code of conduct from memory. It might be worth us trying to work out how we can maybe influence that, or whether the things we can work with through them, rather than seeing it as something that we've got to set up ourselves from scratch.
Yeah, sounds an idea, that.
Yeah, Chairman.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think, because these events fall into, I think they fall into two main categories. There's the specific sporting event, and then there's the charity fundraising event. I'd be interested to know if there's we know the fundraising events have a code of conduct. Really interesting to know, find out some more details about what happens with the sporting events. But I think, whether they have or they haven't, they should have one, I think. And we should be encouraging that any event that does happen on Gower and wider Swansea, really, should be following those codes of conduct, because that, to my mind, that if they're written correctly, they should be reducing the risks and the impacts. If we'd had some good communication, for example, about the Ironman event, and some good communication between what they were doing, they may well have discovered that the Gower show had already been, the date for that had already been set, and they could have put another date in the calendar for their event. I think a lot of it is to do with communication.
Absolutely.
I say, sorry, Chairman, but can I just, the original concern with this, that these should have been brought to this committee, because if this had been brought to this committee, there are people within the council who knew this was happening. Somebody made a decision to, yeah, we're getting to bed with Ironman and do this and that, but this was months ago. I mean, nobody knew on this committee that it was going to be happening. There are half a dozen people on this committee who would have said, hang on a minute, Gower show, you can't just move it back or move it forward. It doesn't work like that. There's been all sorts of difficulties thrown at the Gower show because of this.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but it's something we can hopefully we learn from, and try to make sure it doesn't happen again. Deborah.
Yeah, just following on from that, just to say, I mean, we have a special events team in the council that get consulted on a lot of these events, and have a safety advisory group that meets to consider them. And maybe, we need to just have a conversation with them to make sure that we're consulted on any events that come to them that are programmed for Gower. And I know we've been trying to work with them to get like a code of conduct to ensure that the events that we run as a council or jointly are run in an environmentally sustainable way. So I think just perhaps good to have a conversation with them about how we can ensure we get that communication improved.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, then, thank you. Good discussion there. And then the next item is Klein Valley Country Park. Barbara, you still with us, and it's did you want to add anything to it?
Sorry.
Okay.
Hello. Well, I presented the paper, and hopefully you've had a chance to read it.
Yeah.
The last two paragraphs are the important ones, really. The fact that other parks in the area, in Swansea Council area, have dedicated teams to look after them. And we've been very fortunate that the environment team and the AONB team have had the funds to be able to work with us in the valley and do a lot of positive things. Our concern is when the funds dry up, and we are anticipating this management plan, who's going to initiate it and who's going to support it, who's going to do the stuff. And because it comes under the heading of AONB, I wanted to highlight this concern, hoping that the AONB steering group would support. I don't know how one finds the funds or impetus or whatever, but there should at least be a ranger or a warden, if not a team of people that can pursue this management plan that's in the making. So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Oh, thank you for that. Any comments? No? Oh, there's Mark. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to be the first one to start talking on all of this. Sorry, is it me, Mark, or Mark Thomas?
Yourself? Yeah.
Sorry.
Both. Mark first then, all right.
Yeah, so thanks, Chair, and thank you, Barbara, for the paper. I mean, Klein Valley Volunteers have been a really good organisation locally, and have done a lot of hard work and intelligent input into various ideas in Klein. So I think we and the council should give them good their message credence. They're right to. I think the area is big enough to deserve allocated resources, whether that's one individual or a team or part-time of various people, whatever. It's certainly big enough and has been, in my view, under-resourced up till now. Hopefully, a new management plan will give some direction to how the area should be managed alongside voluntary groups like Klein Valley. I think what we need to be aware that to have an individual and relevant kit, because obviously there's going to be a significant amount of equipment going with that individual to do various bits of work. We're probably asking them, is going to be 50,000 a year plus. We need to find for one person, so it's not going to be cheap, but I think it's important, and perhaps we should look at other country parks as well and see how they're staffed up. I suspect they're not they don't have specific staff allocated to them, but staff within the wider parks department and environment departments of the council probably help run them. But once we've got a management plan, and not before, I think we do need to say to Swansea Council, this is a very valuable park in lots of different ways with lots of different demands on it, and it needs proper management, and that would need resources.
All right, thank you, Mark. And then Mark Thomas.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the point just for clarification, because everybody might not be aware of how the different systems work within the authority, and the management of Klein Valley Park and other parks is historic. The way they are dispersed, the way they are managed is not a recent development. It's the way, I suppose, certainly before my time, the way they've always been done. But I mean, in the Barbara's article there, it says that many parks have a dedicated team of council employees to sustain them. Why doesn't Klein Valley? And that's a fair point. But I just wanted for clarification to make the point that the rest of parks sit outside of, in a totally different portfolio, in a totally different budget than this park. So it's not the case of parks are neglecting Klein Valley, because Klein Valley doesn't belong to parks. I said it's not about passing the buck. It's not about making excuses. I'm not, along with Mark, Mark Child, who just said all the points about we are supportive and we value Klein Valley, and nobody is saying, I'm certainly not saying that it doesn't deserve more, spent on it, a better infrastructure, etc., etc. But historically, it's never been managed. Not that I can remember. I mean, Paxton's been on the council a lot longer than me, and Marcus, certainly they may have, we can go back further. But I just wanted to make that point that it's not the case of we've got a parks budget, and within that parks budget, Klein Valley is being neglected. It sits outside of that budget, and many of you may know that. But I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't that crossover. But certainly, it's a highly valued asset for us. It's well thought of, and again, we really appreciate the work that's done by all the volunteers there, without whom it wouldn't be what it is today. So I'd certainly support anything we can do as an authority to improve, the amount of money being spent on it, on the funding for it. But that needs to be looked at on a wider sort of all council approach to it. But certainly supportive in principle of looking at how we fund and manage the park itself.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's thank you, Mark. Hamish.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff has been said. Really, I really support the work that Klein Valley Community Project's been doing in Klein over recent years. I think it's really important that we've got a motivated and active group that we can work with, all the statutory authorities can work with. I think it does need a long-term approach. I think a sustained the management plan will be key to that. NRW hasn't got a lot of money it can throw at these things. It's much easier for us to work in partnership. I think the ingredients are there. We can continue our project applications to even get some money for it. But I just want to support the the idea that we all work together in Klein and that we don't let it slip now this work has started.
Yep, that's a good idea.
Chairman?
Sorry, I'll bring you in now, Gordon. I got Paxton's next.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to more or less agree with what Mark was saying initially, I think, because I think both of us for the last 12, 18 months have been saying we need something of this nature put into place as far as the council is concerned, because this is a prime asset that has to be protected, and there's no two ways about that. How exactly we do that, I'm not quite sure. I think that's for officers to come back with proposals on that. And I'm not saying of necessity, even the officers in terms of that we've got on this meeting, but whether legal officers or whatever need to get involved with that to find out what mechanisms can be put in place is another matter. But I certainly would support exactly what Mark was saying. I think we've been both talking the same way for some time now. It needs to happen. I know there was a meeting in November, which unfortunately I had to give my apologies for. And certainly before that, we'd had a meeting of interested parties. And I was tasked at that time really to set up an interest group to try and take that forward. But I thought it was best, and I think Chris agreed with me, it was best that an officer led that and he'd picked that up and he's been running with it. And that was, I guess, that meeting in November was one element of that. So yes, I'm totally supportive in terms of what Mark was saying, and the sooner we can get something in place in that respect, the better it's going to be.
Indeed, thank you. Chris Lindley. Where are we, Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Yeah, this is great. All those comments are all very positive. I just wanted to just confirm for everyone that we are developing the management plan. We've had we're shortly going to be sharing it internally with our team, just to make sure we're going down the right lines with things. But it is very definitely, if we want to establish resources for the management of the country park, we need to be very clear what their role is going to be. Do we want somebody who's going around picking litter up, or do we want somebody who is going to be looking at education opportunities within the park, or is it somebody who's going to be controlling antisocial behaviour in the park? We need to understand what the priorities are for the management. So that will be forthcoming, and I'm expecting we'll have something to share with you in the new year on that. The other thing, just to mention briefly, is that obviously there are lots of things happening in the park that the council are doing already, and do put resources into, and it is important to make a note of that. And what we're trying to do with the management plan is to actually get some coordination to all of that. So all the sections in the council that are developing things within the national park, it's all going towards the management of the country park. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you, Chris. And then I've got John and then Gordon.
Yes, just about the country park, I'm very impressed by what the volunteers do, and what the council has done is quite a lot, but I would be worried if the council was going to do too much. In essence, it's different because it is a place where you discover and wonder, and I wouldn't want to see it, how shall we say, made anonymous and made into something rather like an ordinary park. It's a very different place, and it's the nature of it is worth preserving. It's a place you can go into and wonder where you're going from now, and it's very important, I think, to preserve that, because it's different. It gives people a different kind of environment to explore, and exploration is the essence. And I don't think it should be too directed. I think sometimes local authorities do sort of fall into that trap. Anyway, that's just a point of view, Chairman. Thank you.
All good comment. Thank you, John. Gordon?
Quickie. A prime asset needs protection. Yes. But is it not in the AONB? And if it's in the AONB, we haven't even got anybody on the AMB as a warden. So I'm a little bit mystified now why Klein Valley should all of a sudden have more protection than the rest of the AONB.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Gordon. It is on, a paper produced by Barbara and with some suggestions. Chris, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Gordon, it's half and half. So it's part in the AONB, part outside the AONB. I think the important thing is because it is such a great resource on the periphery of the AONB, but it's a great way to introduce people to to the AONB. But yeah, yes, I'd take your point about resources. But we've got to start somewhere, and I think the fact that it is an asset in the council's control in the AONB makes it very important that we do look after it and protect it. Thank you.
Indeed. Paxton, did you want to come back in?
Very quickly, if I may then, Chairman, I think in terms of what Gordon said, obviously as far as the AONB is concerned, we have a management plan in place, and it's our job to ensure or to oversee that plan and then ensure that it's delivered against. And I think we're talking something similar that we would like to see. I think Mark and I are talking anyway in terms of that, something similar in terms of the Klein Valley project as well, just to make sure that we have got that oversight and we know exactly what's going on and making sure that it is protected and made as usable sensibly as possible, I suppose, is what it amounts to. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Pax. In my view, and I stand corrected, it's the largest, or it's a very significant piece of council-controlled land within the AONB. And if the council needs to demonstrate that it can properly manage the land that it owns within the AONB, as an example to everybody else within the AONB about how they manage their land as well. So I think it's a demonstration piece as well as a valuable piece in its own right. And what John France said was exactly right. It's unique in character, and we need to, whilst as many people as possible enjoy that uniqueness, we need to preserve it as well. And that's the key to the plan, I think.
And how do we do? Exactly. And then, as Chris said, we've got the management plan being reviewed and so on. Can we have those, what's in Barbara's report considered at least? And how do we manage Klein Valley? Thank you. And Deborah, are you coming back in? Deborah? Just
to say, I think that the issue really is, it's that there is capital money out there for funding works on the ground, but it is the revenue which we struggle with, and having that continuity of staff resource, which is so important. And, Klein is really a special place, but we also own 3 local nature reserves within the AONB. We don't receive funding. There's no budget other than a sort of minimal staff resource to look after those. So I think it's Klein is a priority, obviously, Barbara, and I really appreciate all the work that you and the team have been doing, but it is a wider issue. I think, there's a lot of other lands that we own on Gower that we need to find the resources to look after properly.
Indeed. And it's as you say, balance in it all. Indeed. Thank you. Right. And thank you for your report, Barbara. The next item then is marked as information, the report of the review with the Gower landscape sensitivity and capacity study for caravan and camping sites. Is Ruth with us?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Is the camera on? Hi, everybody. I'm just here really, I assume everyone's read the report, and whether there are any questions that anybody wanted to ask me about it.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for your report.
Okay.
Any comments, any questions for Ruth? No? Oh, it's Gordon, sorry.
Sorry, I can't resist. We've been looking at events within Gower, and I must confess there is a hell of a lot of new developments below the radar. The radar in this is planning. And I don't know if you're aware of this, Ruth, but there's an awful lot of yurts, shepherd huts, sheds, extensions going on which are off the radar until you look at Google Earth and look there. And then all of a sudden it pops up. Caravans, camper vans, yurts. And then you click on the appropriate button and you're into a website of these places. They've never had planning. And it's a phenomena that has grown in the last 2 years, particularly since the pandemic. And I think you should be aware of that they're not contributing financially into the system. They're taking money in. They're quite popular venues, these places. And we're not talking about Airbnb, although they do come in under that. But we are talking about structures and tents, for want of a better word, which are there. And it's impossible to know where they are unless you Google them. And even flying over, as we do twice a year, we can only pick up a smattering. But it's worth you just going into Google Earth, especially professional one, although they don't pop up the words as much as the ordinary Google map one. Anyway, worth a look.
With this study, we obviously compiled all the plan applications since 2014, since the previous study, up to March this year, and gave those a whole list of those to John Campion Associates. So they were aware of everything that's been granted planning permission, whether temporary permissions and seasonal permissions and so forth. In terms of ones that have been established without planning permission, obviously, we don't know about those until somebody reports them to us and then the appropriate enforcement actions taken. But as everyone knows, at the moment, there's a huge backlog in enforcement actions. So they just need to go through the system, and that way, we can't react until somebody tells us that these are there, if you like, and somebody reports them to us. So
could I just say that we're not complaining really against everyone that's there, but it doesn't seem fair on people such as ourselves at the back of my house here, where we go through the planning system, we have legislation, we have insurance, we have to pay the council and the appropriate tax, and these little thieves, once they're off the radar, they don't come back in. They're not going to put their hands up and say we're here, charge us something, because that's why they're not on the system.
They should have planning permission, shouldn't they?
Oh, so, of course. And why should they have exceptions? So we're not having a downer on tourism in that sense. We just think it's wrong that people should be able to do what they like with and just ignore the system that we all, well, many of us respect. Thank you, Chairman.
That's Ruth's point, though, isn't it? Is that these sites need reporting so that enforcement can do their job. Hamish, thank you.
Yeah, just a very simple and basic comment about accommodation, new accommodation, and new developments in general. Is that in Gower there's a problem with disposing of sewage in many ways, in many places. And we get a lot of developments, not just holiday accommodation, but sometimes houses, where they say they're going to dispose of their sewage to a septic tank, even though the ground conditions are unsuitable, etc., etc. I'm from Natural Resources Wales, by the way, Ruth. And can we make sure that that is factored in whenever we are considering, when everyone is considering whether a development is appropriate, because it does cause us problems, and sometimes planning permission is given and it's too late for us to sort it out. So people come to us and say, well, what are we going to do now? And the pressure is for them to put an unsuitable system in, and it happens time and time again. I
understood that NRW are normally consulted, and we have your comments and also.
Yeah, we aren't always consulted on everything. We are statutory consultee, but we're not always consulted on everything, and sometimes not all of the comments filter through. And I think there's a policy that a planning policy that isn't always adhered to as strictly as it might be with some of these developments. There is one at the moment where a number of kind of cottages, cabins have been built, and we're not sure where they're going to drain to. And I know that it's a bit of a problem. So it doesn't always happen as it should.
Okay. Okay. I'll take that back to development management then and let them know.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. If you would, yeah, thank you. And thank you all for your comments there. And then item 7 is our last item here, but there's 3 parts to it. There's the Sustainable Development Fund. Mike, did you want to add anything to?
No, Chairman. I think the first part, part A, is the financial summary for the SDF fund, and you can see that as it was last quarter, we've had 15 projects approved. We're fully committed for this year now, and we're waiting to see what funds are available for next year when we can open the process up again. Going on to the, unless there are any questions for that, are there any questions on that item?
Can't see any hands up, Mike.
Thank you. Right, the second item is really a follow-up from last time. Last time we discussed the amendments we were proposing to make about how we appoint our SDF grant panel and the appeals panel. We've been advised by the council's legal team that we don't have to do a change of terms of reference for these items, so we should be able to get that put in place. And what I will do is we will send around a draft copy of the guidance note that I keep, which says how we appoint people, so that you will all have seen a copy of that. If there are any queries on that, then we can just discuss those and sort the bits and pieces out. But we should be able to have that in place so that we can appoint 2 members of the grants panel and 2 members of the appeals panel in the spring. And we can then get a rolling process of people both being appointed to the panels and then stepping down after a 2-year period. So we'll get a refresh on the membership on a regular basis then, rather than it running for 2 years all the time.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Sorry.
The third and final piece was, I mentioned last time that we were considering a small grant scheme on landscape and biodiversity. I will shortly send you out some drafts of a specific application form for this, and also some guidance notes to go with it. I'm hoping that before it goes out, I will have managed to speak to Nature Conservation team, and yes, it's my fault that it hasn't already been, but we'll get that sent out to the Nature Conservation team. We'll get their opinions as well. What I'd be looking for when we send it out to members of the steering group is their views on how we can phrase the guidance and the advice so that it's specific to Gower rather than general, so that we can get the best possible results on Gower for the biodiversity and the landscape works that we'd be looking for. This will be small scale schemes. The intention is that they wouldn't be any more than £6,000 in total on each scheme, that it will be 50% funding, and really sort of short term, if you like, sort of almost a capital project, that it'll be something that's quick and relatively simple. These aren't long developmental projects. These are quick sort of wins, and hopefully we can get both community groups, community councils, and also landowners involved as well, and taking advantage of the scheme.
Indeed. Okay, well, I've got Paul's hand up. Paul?
Hi. Is now the time to pass comment on the few things you included in the document you sent, Mike?
If you want, or if you want to keep your powder dry for later, I'd be very happy to have any comments because it'll help me draft it in the right way.
It was just it says quite specifically, you know, what the funding would fund, and they were quite specific activities. I thought some of them aren't. I don't think quick wins or shouldn't be considered quick wins, and there's possibly something missing off that list, in my opinion. So I don't know if now's the time to discuss that, or if you want to chat outside of the meeting, Mike.
Shall we discuss it outside? I'm not trying to close the discussion down, but if you want to go into the detail of which ones those would be and if there's better ways or even different subjects, I'd be more than happy to discuss those and see how we can write them in.
Great.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, you're right with that, Paul?
Yep, very good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deborah?
Yeah, just going to say, Mike, and I'm sure you've already got this on your, in your radar, but obviously with the RDP, work was done on looking at how to produce some guidance on encouraging schemes to help to meet the climate and nature emergencies. So I was just wondering whether, there's scope to, if it hasn't already been in there, if it's not already in there, to include climate in this as well.
I don't see why we shouldn't. It's primarily a process of seeing whether it fits alongside the other items on those lists, and if we can write it in, that would be fine.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
One of the things is that this doesn't replace the SDF scheme, so if projects are likely to run on over 1, 2, 3 years and have different outputs, because these are the intention is these are primarily practical based. For example, how much area of wildflower meadow can we create or enhance, how much tree planting, how much hedge management. So if it's more complicated and relating more to sort of working with groups and developing and interpretation education work, then I think I'd probably be encouraging people to apply for funding through the SDF itself rather than this, which is sort of a sub scheme, as it were.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
And maybe it's something I need to write into the guidance to make that clear.
I suppose it's just having declared a climate and nature emergency. I know this fund is not just council, it's it's the National AONB fund, but just a consideration to encourage people to think about projects that would support that, given that the RDP, I guess, is going to run out in the next year or two. So just a thought.
Yes.
Fair comment.
No, I'd be delighted, Deb.
Okay. I can see no other hands up, Mike. Thank you very much for your report there.
Thank you.
Particularly on that last one there. I look forward to people participating and seeing the results as well. So that concludes our meeting, folks. Thank you very much for your patience earlier. Well, Hamish made a comment there. Thank you. And our next meeting is in March on the 14th. But in the meantime, can I wish you all a happy, peaceful Christmas and hopefully a better New Year. And thank you all so much. Bye now.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.